Hogwarts, Grey Demon Lords Rise in Wizarding World. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 91, No One Knows Black Magic Better Than Me. Dumbledore arrived at the scene, followed by many other teachers. Many young wizards also noticed the movement here and rushed here suddenly. The huge corridor was overwhelmed. When people saw the writing on the wall and hysterical Filch, the noise suddenly disappeared. Enemies with heirs, vigilance. The next one is you, Mud. Shut up. Malfoy whispered to Crabbe. He didn't want to lose one of his henchmen. Alvin glanced at Malfoy in surprise, and he felt that Malfoy had changed a bit recently. Although he still likes to go against Harry, he has become more dignified, but now is not the time to study Malfoy's changes. Filch is complaining to Dumbledore. He did it. It's him. Filch spat and said. He found the letter from my office. He knew I was a squib. Whoosh. As soon as Filch finished speaking, the crowd just boiled. They didn't expect that this school administrator who had been looking for trouble with students everywhere was actually a squib. What is a squib? Hermione asked Alvin in a low voice. Refers to those who were born into a wizarding family but could not use magic. Alvin explained, then asked Harry why they were here. He and Ron went to the almost headless Nick's death party and somehow ended up here. After Hermione finished speaking, Alvin was a little sudden. There was indeed this paragraph in the original book, but it was a long time ago, and it was not an important thing. He had long forgotten it. All right, Filch. Dumbledore opened his mouth to interrupt his accusation. This is not the place to talk. Let's go talk somewhere else. My office is upstairs, you can go there. Lockhart spoke happily, and this opportunity to be in the limelight would not be missed. Dumbledore nodded in thanks, and took the professors and Harry upstairs to Lockhart's office, but before he left, he handed over Alvin. Gaunt, come too. Alvin was a little surprised, but he also wanted to study some of the situation after being petrified by the basilisk, and did not refuse. After turning around and lip-syncing to Cho about the house, he followed upstairs. Entering the office, Dumbledore put Lady Loris on the table, illuminated the whole cat with a candle, and observed the slender fingers poked here and there, as if looking for something. Lockhart was not idle, and he kept saying some strange spell names to show his erudition. No one knows the dark arts better than I do. It's a pity that no one took care of him at this time, which made Lockhart a little embarrassed, smiled coyly, and shut up on the sofa and didn't speak. Alvin also stood aside and carefully observed Lady Loris, and he soon realized that this petrification was different from the spell. It was more like a curse. Being hit by the petrification spell is just that the body cannot move, but the consciousness is still there, and it can clearly perceive the situation in the outside world. And Lady Loris, as if asleep, not only could not move, but also lost consciousness. If he hadn't clearly sensed that its life breath still existed, Alvin suspected that the cat had fallen under the Sufa curse. It's not dead, Filch. Dumbledore came to the same conclusion as Alvin. It's a very weird petrified state, but don't worry, we can revive it. Professor Sprout recently got some mandrakes that can be restored to Lady Loris once they mature. Dumbledore's patient explanation calmed Filch's mood a little, but he still demanded that Harry be severely punished, and he always believed that Harry was the culprit. Mr. Filch, I don't think it can be done to this level with Harry's level of spells. Alvin was a little impatient by his noise, and opened his mouth to defend Harry. Harry. Should he thank Alvin? Or should he be angry because Alvin taunted his level of spells? Snape also sneered when he heard Alvin's words. Since Harry changed back to Harry, the state between Snape and Harry has returned to the past, even worse. Ask for flowers. Gaunt, do you have a different opinion? Old Dang looked at Alvin at this time, wanting to hear his opinion. No, Professor, I have the same opinion as you. This is a petrification technique similar to a curse. Alvin shook his head and said slowly, but he immediately threw out a new question. May I ask why the school happens to have mandrake? As soon as this question came out, the office was quiet, and Harry and Ron were a little frightened. They didn't expect Alvin's question to be so acute. Gaunt, I can answer this question for you. Professor Sprout, who had not spoken, spoke. In fact, although mandrakes are not a particularly cherished material, but because of the single use, few people will grow them, and this time the Ministry of Magic ordered a batch for use as a reserve, and I will use it as experimental materials for you, by the way. And the newly ripened Mandela herbs are the most effective, and it is also the best choice to refine potions. Hearing Sprout's explanation, Alvin also understood a little. When he watched the movie in his previous life, he felt that it was a coincidence. The basilisk had not yet appeared, and the Old Dang was even ready to put on the mandrake. Was he really so exhausted? Old Dang was not dissatisfied with Alvin's doubts. This kind of thing is normal, after all, even he feels too coincidental. Inside the house, Hermione, Cho, and twin brothers were already waiting here. As soon as Alvin and Harry arrived at the door, Fredra let them in. "How's it going? Are you all right?" The twins looked at Ron and asked with some concern. Although they are usually not very reliable, they still care about things when their younger brother encounters them. "It's okay." Ron shook his head. At this time, Harry spoke. "I hear the snake again." Everyone looked at Harry in unison. He was a little nervous. "I heard the voice say again, tear you apart, kill you again. The legend of the 92nd secret room." "What? Are you actually a Parseltongue?" After listening to Harry's narration, Ron looked at Harry in disbelief. "I told you about that voice last time, and you don't believe it yourself." Harry said he didn't carry the pot. "You didn't tell me it was the voice of a snake either." Ron looked aggrieved and looked betrayed. "Ron, don't make trouble." George and Fred spoke in unison, interrupting Ron. "Alvin, do you know what the Chamber of Secrets is?" Alvin thought about it and decided to say it from the beginning. "You all know that Hogwarts was founded by 4 founders, right?" Everyone nodded. Alvin continued, "Hogwarts Castle is said to have been built on the home of Slytherin, and the entire castle, including the Forbidden Forest, is the property of the Slytherin family. His family is really rich." Ron said enviously. "Don't get sidetracked." George gave Ron a smack to quiet him. Alvin ignored them, but continued. "In the beginning, the 4 founders went around looking for talented young people to bring to school, but slowly, the Slytherins and the others disagreed. Slytherins want Hogwarts to recruit students only from pure-blood wizards, and Muggle children are unreliable because of this. The 4 founders had a big fight, and then the Slytherin left the school." Alvin finished speaking, a little thirsty, conjured up a glass of lemon juice to moisten his throat, and then continued. "It is said that before the Slytherin left, he left a secret room and closed him, and only when the descendants of Slytherin came to the school, they could really open it, release the horrors inside, and clean up all students who were not worthy of learning magic, which is the origin of the secret room." After he finished speaking, he didn't open his mouth, giving everyone some time to digest. Everyone was immersed in the story Alvin had just told, and they didn't know that there was such a story for a long time when Hogwarts was founded, and they reacted, and Cho was the first to ask, "So, the heirs of Slytherin have appeared now? That's why the Chamber of Secrets will be opened?" Alvin shook his head. "In fact, 50 years ago, the Chamber of Secrets was opened once, when a girl died at Hogwarts, and a student named Tom Riddle caught the guy who opened the Chamber of Secrets and won the Special Contribution Award from the school. The man who was caught was later expelled, but Dumbledore stayed at the school, and you all know him." "Hagrid." Hermione reacted quickly. She couldn't believe that that humble big man would open the Chamber of Secrets and kill a Hogwarts student. "It can't be Hagrid." Harry's reaction was particularly strong, and among the people who did it, he had the best relationship with Hagrid. These are all recorded in the book, Hogwarts, A School History, although Hagrid's name is not written specifically, but if you check the expulsion record, you will find him, and the student who was killed was Myrtle in the girls' bathroom 44. Alvin said calmly, but then he threw a bombshell. "The student named Tom Riddle later changed his name, and you've all heard of it. That name is Voldemort." Hearing this name, except for Harry, everyone else trembled and breathed a cold breath. "So it must have been Voldemort who opened the Chamber of Secrets and laid the blame on Hagrid," Harry said excitedly. "I'll go to Dumbledore now and ask him to help Hagrid clear his grievances." With that, Harry was ready to get up and go out. With a wave of Alvin's wand, he directly sat him back in place and shook his head. How could Harry have studied with him for so long, or so humble? "Sit down, do you have proof? Why should Dumbledore believe what you say?" Alvin scolded, and Harry was immediately honest. "I tell you that the purpose of this is to make you more vigilant and not to think about looking for some secret room, where there is never a treasure, but a danger." After Alvin's last sentence, he ended today's conversation and let everyone go back to the dormitory. Alvin returned to the dormitory and did not sleep immediately, but entered the suitcase and walked some props. Now he has not mastered the Parseltongue language, and he has secretly gone to the girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor before, trying to open the door of the secret room with the Parseltongue cavity, but there is no response. Until then, he needs some props to keep Cho and Hermione safe. Alvin's words were quickly spread by Ron's big mouth, which immediately caused a sensation at Hogwarts. However, Ron was reliable and did not say the fact that Tom was Voldemort. The young wizards were particularly curious about that period of history, and the few books in the library, Hogwarts, A School History, were borrowed from the bold students who kept asking Professor Binns about the Chamber of Secrets in the history of wizarding class. Professor Binns rarely raged in class, claiming that the Chamber of Secrets was fake and that they should focus on more authentic histories rather than these ethereal campus legends. Fred and George take the opportunity to sell their own amulets, and the young wizards panic, and the sales are actually good, but Professor McGonagall discovers them and confiscates all their remaining inventory. Dumbledore quickly approached Alvin and asked him to take a trip to the office. "Gaunt, I think your words have made everyone even more panicked." Dumbledore frowned, looking a little headache. "I just told the facts I knew, didn't I?" Alvin didn't care, he was now more and more casual in the face of old Dang. Dumbledore is actually a person who tells 0-4 evidence, no matter what he thinks about you in his heart, as long as there are no facts in front of him, he will still think that you are a good boy. Sure enough, old Dang sighed, did not accuse Alvin of anything, but said admonishingly, "Although these things are all facts, they are not what students should worry about, and I don't want them to live in a panic environment." Looking at old Dang like this, Alvin is also a little complicated. Dumbledore's love for the school is undoubted, and seeing the students so panicked really makes this 100-year-old man a little exhausted. "Don't worry so much, Professor, in fact, we can use another way to divert their attention." Alvin's words aroused Dumbledore's curiosity, and the old man set his eyes on Alvin. Episode 93, Harry the Rubber Fruit Ability, Duel Club. Shortly after Halloween, the annual Quidditch Cup begins. This year's Slytherin has 7 Light Wheels 2001, which Cho attaches great importance to, and the Ravenclaw team has been training very frequently lately. However, Alvin did not follow the training, and with his technical training, it is useless, as long as he can protect Cho perfectly in the game. The first match of the year was Slytherin vs Gryffindor, and today Slytherin's 7 new broomsticks are about to be unveiled, and in the face of such a huge hardware gap, all the little lions braved the heavy rain to watch the game and cheer for Gryffindor. During the game, the hapless Harry encountered another situation. He was targeted by a bludger. This bludger specifically grabbed Harry alone and hammered, and it was full of force. However, Harry had experience playing against Alvin last semester and could hold on for a while, and in the end he managed to catch the golden snitch on Malfoy's head at the cost of being hit by a bludger. However, his arm was also broken by the bludger, and Lockhart's commotion directly left Harry's entire arm boneless. Alvin didn't watch the game and he didn't like going out during a thunderstorm. But when the young wizards who came back told him about today's results, he became interested in Harry's arm. Alvin arrived at the school infirmary and quickly found Harry. At this time, Harry was lying on the hospital bed, holding a Quidditch magazine in his left hand, and Harry was very happy to see Alvin's arrival. "Alvin, I'm glad you came to see me." Alvin casually said a few perfunctory words, and then he reached Harry's side and raised his right hand. At this time, Harry's right hand can be called really weak and boneless, and the whole arm is like a rubber man who has eaten rubber fruits. Alvin casually fiddled with Harry's arm, and from time to time tied a knot with his fingers. Playing with it wasn't until Harry's dead fisheye completely lost its light that he put down Harry's arm without hesitation. "Do you remember the spell that Lockhart recited then?" Alvin asked with interest. "I don't know. I'm going to rest." Harry was a little torn by Alvin's commotion and was about to close the door to see off Alvin what else Alvin wanted to say, but Madame Pomfrey came in and threw Alvin out, claiming that Harry needed enough rest to grow bones faster. For the master of the school infirmary, even Alvin did not dare to provoke, so he could only run away in ashes, leaving only Harry, who was able to act like a gum fruit. Harry's hand recovered well, and he came out of the school hospital on Sunday night. However, after this incident, he not only deepened his dislike for Lockhart, but also added a little more fear. Alvin also found that Lockhart seems to be able to make some bad things worse. The last elf incident, this time Harry's arm, this ability is also no one. A week later, Alvin and Hermione were walking through the foyer when they suddenly saw a small crowd gathered around the bulletin board, and Harry excitedly walked out of the crowd. "They're going to start a dueling club," Harry said. "First party tonight." Harry is a little happy, and has recently learned a lot of spells with Alvin, but he is always abused and has no sense of accomplishment. But this is a great opportunity for the duel club to teach Malfoy a good lesson. Alvin looked at Harry so happy and nodded, facing Hermione and Cho. He said, "You two can also find some opponents in the dueling club and improve your combat experience." "You don't seem surprised at all about the duel club?" Cho looked a little strange at Alvin's flat look, as if Alvin had known about the existence of this club for a long time. Alvin nodded. Ken listened to Cho's guess. "Before, Dumbledore complained that I had shaken out the matter of the Chamber of Secrets for fear of causing panic, so I came up with an idea to divert the attention of the little wizard." "So did you run this club?" Hermione asked curiously. Alvin shrugged his shoulders and said negatively, "I don't know, I just made a suggestion. As for how it was implemented, I don't know." "Okay, let's go to dinner first, and we'll know everything at night." After that, Alvin walked into the auditorium and began to cook at 8 o'clock in the evening, the school auditorium. The long dining table disappeared, and in the center of the auditorium was a makeshift square gilded stage, illuminated by hundreds of candles floating overhead. I don't know who taught us. Harry squeezed into the crowd and said with difficulty. Alvin told me that Professor Flitwick was a dueling champion when he was young, and it should be him. Hermione stood with Alvin and Cho, and Alvin cast a barrier spell to block a space and prevent others from squeezing over. As long as it's not. Before Harry could finish his words, he turned into a crouch, and Lockhart, the last thing he wanted to see, stepped onto the stage. Today's Lockhart, dressed in a fuchsia robe, the 960 shines brightly and stands on stage with his trademark smile, while next to him is Snape with a stinky face. Lockhart enjoyed the feeling of being in the limelight, waving to silence everyone as he spoke aloud. It's an honor that I'm able to support the Duel Club, and when Headmaster Dumbledore talked about this proposal, I knew it was a club for me. He really doesn't want to face. Hermione looked angry, obviously Alvin's proposal, but it became tailor-made for Loesch. Cho nodded approvingly. Alvin looked at the two women with a smile. He never cared about this little thing, and even he made the suggestion so that the two women could have some opponents to practice against each other and accumulate some combat experience. Lockhart was still chattering on stage, of course, selling his books in the last 30 seconds. He was finally willing to introduce Snape, whose face was getting darker and darker next to him. Professor Snape himself knows a thing or two about dueling, and he generously agreed to help me do a little demonstration before class. Don't worry, I'll give you your potions, Professor, back in good condition. After speaking, he also cracked his mouth and smiled, showing a mouthful of big white teeth. Episode 94, Alvin, you were first at Hogwarts. Alvin didn't know if Snape would be intact, but he knew that Lockhart would not be able to stay today. Didn't you see that Snape's eyes were already surging with murderous intent? Lockhart didn't realize that he was in trouble, and was still enthusiastically introducing the rules of dueling. As you can see, we hold our wands in our normal dueling position. Lockhart said to the little wizard below. Count to 3, we use the first spell, of course, we will not harm each other's lives. Alvin looked at Snape's smile and silently mourned for Lockhart for a second. 1, 2, 3. The two threw their wands out suddenly, and Snape was the first to shout, remove your weapons. Suddenly a dazzling red light flashed. Lockhart was hit instantly, the wand in his hand flew out, he also fell backwards, hit the wall, and then slipped down. The young wizards of Slytherin applauded their headmaster, and some looked at Lockhart worriedly. Is he all right? Hermione covered her mouth and said in a lost voice, although she didn't like Lockhart, she didn't want to see him die just like that. Don't worry, Hermione, Snape has actually left his hand. Alvin frowned as he comforted Hermione. He found that Lockhart's fighting reaction was not weak, and he took out his wand almost at the same time as Snape and raised it in front of him. Logically speaking, such a waste should not be able to have such speed, and he suddenly had some curiosity about Lockhart. Some doubts gradually surfaced in Alvin's mind. Why is Loha so skilled in the Oblivion spell, while other spells are close to the level of a squib? Pressing the doubts in his heart, Alvin was ready to have time to explore. At this time, Lockhart had already stood up, staggered onto the stage, and defended himself with a hard mouth. It's a disarming spell, yes, Professor Snape and I made an agreement to show you the spell, but it was a little accident. But he also knew that if he continued to fight, Snape might do anything to him, and Lockhart immediately changed the subject. Okay, now let's divide you into 2s and 2s. Before he could finish speaking, Snape interrupted him and took the lead in arranging it. Potter, you come up. And you, Malfoy. Malfoy sneered and stepped onto the stage, looking at Harry with a defiant gaze. Harry was not intimidated at this time, and went straight up to the opposite side of Malfoy, looking at Malfoy without showing weakness. Both sides were polite, and Lockhart shouted. Start. Get rid of your weapons. Harry quickly issued a disarming spell, but unfortunately, because he was too nervous, it was a little missed. But this also scared Malfoy, who didn't expect Harry to cast spells so quickly and also disarm spells. Soar. Malfoy also quickly counterattacked. A power release spell hit Harry, and suddenly Harry felt that his limbs were weak, and his whole person could not stand steadily. Tread Lane Terra Dance. Harry resisted a powerless counterattack and hit Malfoy, making him lose control of his legs and dance. Alvin in the audience looked a little speechless, but he didn't expect Harry to learn so many spells in a while, and he forgot them all as soon as he took the stage, and would only attack Malfoy with this kind of over-the-top move. For a time, the two of them used their wands to issue spells, and the scene was good. Colorful spells flew around, but the damage was 250 at a glance. Snape couldn't take it anymore, cast a spell to make the two who had been in a lot of negative states return to their original state, and then resumed the duel. Oolong out. Malfoy roared. The tip of his wand exploded, and a long black snake came out of it and landed on the floor, then raised its head and attacked Harry. Some of the little wizards in the audience were frightened and left the stage. Harry didn't react, and Alvin greeted him with all kinds of snakes in order to learn Parseltongue. Seeing such a small snake daring to show off his might at him, Harry even wanted to laugh a little. He subconsciously wanted to use the Parseltongue to control the snake to attack Malfoy, but he thought that Alvin strictly forbade him to use the Parseltongue in front of outsiders, and he extinguished this idea. Flames! A fireball flew out of the tip of Harry's staff and smashed straight into the black snake, and suddenly the black snake hissed and soon became a ball of char. Harry took advantage of the chase, and with an upside-down admiralty, he hung Malfoy, who was staring at the black snake stupidly, in the air, and then another disarming curse, and the steady hit of Malfoy smoothly knocked his wand away. "I won," Harry said triumphantly, holding Malfoy's wand to Snape on the side. "All other spells that are not allowed to use the disarming charm are said, and Gryffindor will deduct 1 point. Snape said, a little annoyed, and glared at Alvin fiercely. "This kid actually taught this spell to Harry. I don't know if Harry and his father tortured him." Snape with this spell back then. Alvin met Snape's gaze and shrugged helplessly. "You'll give him this spell in the future anyway. I just taught it to Harry a few years in advance." Seeing that there was no way to take Alvin, Snape could only let Malfoy in the air go and let him down. The lost Malfoy glanced at Harry and walked away without saying a word. Harry walked up to Alvin and said a little ostentatiously, "Did you see Malfoy's look? It's so funny." The usher was indeed Alvin's merciless reprimand. "If you add an iron armor spell to yourself in the first place, you can completely defeat him directly against Malfoy's spell, instead of stupidly using your body to receive those evil spells." Hearing Alvin's reprimand, Harry immediately froze, knowing that Alvin was right. He could have beaten Malfoy more easily. At this time, a Slytherin student stepped onto the stage. "Alvin, dare to accept my invitation to a duel?" There was a noise from the audience. Just because this student was very famous, Simone Travers lifted. He is the current student council president and has been a shadow prefect of Slytherin from first year to now. The Slytherin shadow prefect is an interesting system where the strongest student in each grade becomes the leader of the current grade. In other words, Simone is the strongest student in Slytherin right now, and he can even be said to be the strongest student in the entire Hogwarts. Except, of course, Alvin. Fred approached Alvin and whispered to him, "Don't promise him, Alvin. I heard Dad say that this Simeone often follows his family to duel with dark wizards during the holidays. He is not a good stubble." Alvin heard this and smiled, walked onto the stage in front of everyone's eyes. At this time, he seemed to hear someone say another word. "Alvin. You're always the first in Gene Men." Episode 95, Finished Abuse. Standing on the stage, Alvin stood opposite Simeone. The little wizards in the field stopped communicating, looking forward to the battle between these two people. A person is a recognized strong man at Hogwarts. One is a genius who has risen to fame in these 2 years, and has also received the Order of Merlin. The duel between two people is still very interesting. Simeone looked at Alvin on the opposite side and sneered. "Gaunt, I hope you don't lose too ugly for a while. I want you to know that the glory of Slytherin cannot be tarnished." Simone had long seen Alvin unpleasant, and every time Alvin's fame was earned by stepping on the head of Slytherin House. The sorting ceremony, the Transfiguration Club, last year's House Cup, the recent battle in the Quidditch field, every time, Alvin would slap Slytherin House hard in the face and achieve his own prestige. Today's dueling club is definitely Simeone's dream opportunity to fix Alvin. He wants Alvin to suffer in front of everyone. Alvin's reaction to Simeone was not surprising. Most of the Slytherins didn't have a good relationship with him. Instead, Professor Snape next to him frowned. He couldn't help but remind in a loud voice, "Start lightly." Simeone, thinking that Snape was reminding him not to go too far, nodded at Snape to show that he knew Snape's head is full of black lines. "Is this telling you? This is saying this to the little devil opposite you." Alvin tilted his head to look at Snape with a smile, didn't say anything, raised his hand slightly to Simeone, and said softly, "Let's go, you strike first." Simeone saw Alvin so big, and the anger in his heart was even greater. "Get rid of your weapons." Simeone quickly shouted the incantation, and a dazzling red light quickly flew in front of Alvin. It could be seen that Simeone did have 2 brushes, and he could release spells more than twice as fast as Malfoy and Harry. "Huh?" Alvin chuckled, but still did not move, just quietly watched the spell hit him. A wave rose, and the spell hit an invisible wall, only splashing a little ripple and dissipating in the air. But then Simone didn't make any moves, and another spell hit the shield, but it still didn't break it. This is what Alvin was slightly surprised just now. This Simeone not only released a disarming spell very quickly, but also used the light of the disarming curse to hide a silent spell as a real attack. Being at this level in 7th year, Alvin felt he could become an Auror after a few years of training. "Not bad, quite capable," Alvin said approvingly to Simeone opposite. Simeone's face was not very good looking. He knew that Alvin was not that simple, so he did not expect the disarming curse to directly end the battle, but what he did not expect was that his 2 spells could not break Alvin's iron armor curse, which made him a little faceless. Especially Alvin's final praise, as if praising a junior, made him angry. Alvin was also interested, and with a wave of his hand, a table flew onto the stage, changed into a poisonous horned beast, and rushed towards Hermione. Simone did not dare to be careless. A vine spell trapped the poisonous horned beast, and then summoned a flame, which burned together with the vines and the poisonous horned beast. With a wave of Alvin's wand, the poisonous horned beast turned into an eagle, soaring into the sky and breaking free from the flames. The little wizards in the audience were shocked. Whether it was Alvin's superb transfiguration or Hermione's combination of plant and fire spells, they had benefited a lot. It turns out that the wizard duel is not as simple as a spell from you and a spell from me. It's about attacking and defending each other back and forth, which is art. The battle continued, with Hermione casting an iron armor spell before the eagle could attack him, and then a petrification spell controlled the eagle. Alvin did not take advantage of the victory to pursue, and against this kind of person who could not be called an opponent, he still held a playful mentality. Boom! The fire on the field burned more and more intensely, gradually forming a wall of fire between the two. The little wizards standing further in front felt the burning sensation, and loosened their school robes with some discomfort. Professor Flitwick was afraid that the battle on the field would affect others, and imposed a layer of magic enchantment on the huge stage. Hermione looked at the flame in the middle and smiled coldly, knowing that the flame was summoned by him waving his wand. He used all his strength to force the flames in the direction of Alvin. Feeling the higher and higher temperature, Alvin was a little unhappy, but he came to the auditorium after taking a bath, and now he has to wash it again. In a bad mood, he also lost the mind to play with Hermione. Gracefully moving the wand forward, the flame suddenly stopped approaching, and then under Alvin's transformation, it turned into a fire dragon. Not a lizard in the West, but the image of a dragon in Eastern legends, with lifelike limbs and dragon heads, and even the scales on the body looming. Groan! The fire dragon groaned, soared into the air, and coiled up. A pair of dragon eyes stared at Hermione, which brought him great pressure. At this time, Hermione's cold sweat was about to come down, and in the moment just now, he lost control of the flames. The exaggerated fire dragon made his liver and gallbladder crack even more. Such a strong elemental transformation magic, too outrageous. Alvin didn't care about Hermione's mood at this time. He was already a little impatient, and under his control, the fire dragon rushed towards Hermione. I throw in the towel. Hermione shouted from the heart, but the fire dragon had no intention of stopping, and got closer and closer. I throw in the towel. Save me, Professor. His expression gradually frightened, and the fire dragon was about to smash him in the face. Snape wanted to do it, but it was too late. He had just thought that after Hermione shouted to stop, Alvin would stop. I thought that Alvin was such a tiger, as if I hadn't heard it. Some of the little wizards in the audience were already screaming in fear. But at the last moment, the fire dragon suddenly dispersed and became a ring of flame, surrounding Simone to death. Alvin naturally had no intention of killing, but Hermione made him sweat, and he had to be well. Repay, he. That's it. Alvin waved his hand and walked off the stage. Episode 96, Rookie Smash Brothers, Malfoy's Request. With the fall of Alvin, the end of this duel was also announced. Wonderful, Mr. Gaunt and Mr. Travers have brought us a close fight. Lockhart's voice appeared in time to break everyone's silence. The little wizard also came back from the wonderful tactics and brilliant magic just now, and gave warm applause. The professors were also amazed by Alvin, especially Professor Flitwick, and tears of excitement flowed out of their eyes. The professor could see that Alvin deliberately controlled the power of the spell, and only used one iron armor spell and a transformation charm in the whole battle. Alvin's understanding of magic has reached the realm of weightlifting. Even the last fire dragon is a deformation formed by Alvin's fine manipulation of magic, and it is not a profound spell. As for Hermione, who was on stage, he had been rescued by Snape. He was not burned by the flames, but was smoked a little blackened, and Hermione looked like Alvin's eyes full of fear. It is estimated that he now very much wants to beat himself to death. Who provoked Alvin at that time? Alvin calmly walked back to Autumn and Hermione's side, and the crowd automatically gave way to a path, and the little wizard was even more awed when he looked at Alvin now. Fantastic! Cho reported Alvin softly as encouragement. Alvin looked at Hermione, and Hermione blushed and reported it too. Harry next to him hesitated, but finally did not hug him. He was afraid that Alvin would kill him. Lockhart and Snape then divided everyone into groups, and the young wizards began to practice. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional. Most of the Gryffindor lion cubs were against the Slytherin snakes, therefore, the scene is very bloody. Alvin saw Angelina, the Gryffindor chaser, pulling a Slytherin girl's hair. Lee Jordan is using his wand as a sword, and a Slytherin pokes back and forth. Lockhart was already shouting mute, and he was emphasizing that he could only use the disarming charm, but no one would listen to him ignoring these hand-to-hand combat. Alvin's attention was mainly on Hermione and Cho. Cho and Hermione really lived up to Alvin's special training, and their reflexes and spell accuracy were very good. Hermione easily defeated Pansy Parkinson. This Malfoy's little henchman has always looked at Hermione unpleasantly, especially the last time because of Hermione. Malfoy suffered so much, she came up to Hermione. Unfortunately, Hermione knocked her wand away with a single disarming curse, and then the silencing curse left Pansy without even having a chance to throw in the towel. Seeing that the scene was getting more and more chaotic, Lockhart was a little uncontrollable, and hurriedly looked at Snape for help. Snape also knew that there might not even be enough beds in the school infirmary, and Alvin, who spoke, said, "Gaunt, come with me and separate them." Alvin nodded, did not refuse, waved his wand in his hand, and more than a dozen spells gushed out, separating many of the little wizards in the struggle. Madame Pomfrey on the side began to heal the wounded little wizards with an unhappy face. Dumbledore shouldn't have agreed to such a ridiculous proposal. Completely without thinking about security, reckless. So reckless, she said as she drank various potions for the young wizards. Within 5 minutes, almost all the young wizards had recovered, but a few people with broken noses by fists might need to rest for a few days. Needless to say, the little wizards of Hogwarts have a melee heart. Alright, everyone. That's the end of today's club activity. Please keep an eye on the bulletin board for the next event. Seeing that the trouble had been solved, Lockhart was also relieved and hurriedly ended today's event. The young wizards were also a little disappointed to hear that the day was over. They rarely had such a chance to cast a spell to their heart's content, and they were all discussing when the next event would be on the way back. Alvin and Cho also walked back to the dressing room, but they were stopped by a person on their way. "Can you talk to me alone?" Malfoy, who was standing in front of Alvin, said, his tone a little nervous. Alvin was also a little curious about what Malfoy was looking for him for, but he let Cho go back to the common room first, and he led Malfoy to a classroom. Alvin sat back in his chair, looked at Malfoy for a moment and said, "What's the matter?" Malfoy didn't sit down, but stood directly in front of Alvin, and he asked, "Did you hand over Potter's magic?" Alvin didn't expect Malfoy to ask about this, but he didn't mean to hide it, and nodded directly. "That's right, I taught it." "Then can you teach me?" After hesitating, Malfoy said it anyway. "Call you?" Alvin was a little surprised. "Why would you let me teach you magic?" Malfoy said firmly. "Because you're strong. Follow you, and I will know what pure blood glory is." After speaking, Malfoy stood still, waiting for Alvin's decision. Looking at Malfoy carefully, Alvin found that the trace of gloom at Malfoy's brow at this time disappeared a lot, and the inexplicable arrogance was gone. It can be seen that he has really changed quite a lot recently. "I can teach you, but what can you bring to me?" Alvin thought about it and asked Malfoy rhetorically. Malfoy opened his mouth when he heard it, but he didn't say anything. Yes, what can he bring to Alvin? He is not Alvin's friend, and he is not qualified to let Alvin tutor him so freely. Standing up and patting Malfoy on the shoulder, Alvin left the classroom with only a word. "Figure out what you want to get, and what you can give, come to me again." Episode 97, Lockhart, "It was magic that abandoned me." The Malfoy affair was just an episode, and Alvin didn't take it to heart. He is now interested in Lockhart, and Alvin has found that some of Lockhart's theoretical knowledge is still something, but I don't know why, it's hard to release the spell. He had also asked Professor Flitwick about Lockhart's time at school. He's really an annoying presence, he always wants to be famous, he wants to show off. Once upon a time, Lockhart also made the elf send himself a love letter written by himself, and even founded a newspaper. Listening to Professor Flitwick's recollection, Alvin frowned and asked, "So how was his grade?" Because it had been some years, Professor Flitwick thought carefully before saying, "I just remember that his grades in the charms class were good, and although the other subjects were not very good, he also passed the Newt's exam." Alvin, who came out of Professor Flitwick, felt more and more that something must have happened to Lockhart. Will anyone who can pass the Newts, the highest level of wizards, have their wands taken by the Cornish elves? After thinking about it for a long time, Alvin didn't have a clue. So he decided to go straight to Lockhart. In defense against the dark arts class, Lockhart had the young wizards finish the story of his book according to the script he had written since the Cornish elf incident. Lockhart has never given the little wizards any chance to practice. Sometimes he had his works read aloud by young wizards with affection, and sometimes he made up plays. Although Lockhart is a liar, the content of his books is genuine, so the young wizards actually learned a lot. It's just that Harry, who has to cooperate with Lockhart to perform on stage every time, is more difficult after class. Alvin followed Lockhart to his office door, knocked gently. "Please come in," came Lockhart's voice from inside the house. He looked at Alvin, who walked in, a little puzzled as to why he was here. Although Alvin has not troubled him recently, Lockhart also knows that Alvin does not like him as a person. Alvin ignored Lockhart's eyes, sat across the desk, and said with a smile, "Professor, I have some questions for you." Lockhart was a little puzzled, but agreed with a smile on his face, revealing his trademark big white teeth. "No problem, Gaunt, with my rich adventures, I can still answer your questions easily." Alvin didn't refute, nodded with a smile, and then asked a question that made Lockhart creepy. "Professor Lockhart, I would like to ask, under what circumstances will a wizard lose most of his abilities? Only a festering curse?" Smiling reluctantly, Lockhart tried to change the subject. "Actually, in the book I Swam with Vampires, there are also a lot of adventures I can." "Professor, I know that many things, such as these experiences of yours, are stolen." Alvin interrupted Lockhart directly and said calmly, "Unfortunately, your oblivion curse is not cleaned up very cleanly, and someone still remembers some things clearly." Of course, this is Alvin tricking Lockhart, and he doesn't have the energy to collect Lockhart's evidence. Lockhart was really fooled, sighed, and said faintly, "Since you already know." "Forget everything. Armor protector." Two voices sounded in the room at the same time, and Lockhart's spell hit Alvin's shield impartially, losing its trace. "Okay, Professor, don't make trouble, I'm just curious about your past, and I don't want to debunk you." Alvin was not angry, but patiently explained to Lockhart. "Well, what do you want to know?" As if resigned to his fate, Lockhart leaned back in his chair and held his head in his hands, waiting for Alvin's question. "Professor Flitwick told me about some things about your school days, although you were a little unreliable at that time, but at least you graduated from Hogwarts smoothly. But why can't you even use a standard floating charm now?" Lockhart did not speak immediately after listening, but fell into silence, as if he was remembering something. It was a long time before he spoke. "I didn't expect a genius like you to be interested in the past of a liar like me." After sighing a sentence, he continued to speak. "I am a very showy person, I want the wizarding world to know my existence. My idol is Dumbledore, the whole of Europa, who does not know his name. So, when I graduated, I was obsessed with exploring ruins, the gathering place of magical beasts, and any opportunity that would make me famous, I wouldn't miss it." Alvin listened quietly, without meaning to interrupt. "In the 2 or 3 years since I graduated, I have been to many dangerous places, and my strength has improved rapidly, and I can even fight the Aurors for a while. But I'm not satisfied, I want to become stronger, only then will my fame grow, so I set my sights on the pyramid. As long as I can crack a pyramid, I can immediately become famous all over the world." Speaking of this, Lockhart's tone became excited, but then it was deeply low. "Unfortunately, I failed, I almost couldn't get out of the pyramid, I was chased by the mummy inside and fled. If it wasn't for a kind wizard who pulled me by the hand, I would have died inside. And from this time on, my magic went wrong, and I started to have fear, but the more I feared, the faster my magic dissipated. Within 2 years, my magic power was basically at the level of a young wizard who had just entered school." When Alvin heard this, he finally realized that he finally knew why Lockhart had become such a dish 20 at this time. Lockhart's face was full of pain, and a deep hatred remained between his eyebrows. He gritted his teeth and said, "Magic abandoned me, and I began to hate adventures, so I used the oblivion curse that I could only use to steal the stories of successful adventurers. This will not only make me more famous, but also ease my inner jealousy of those who succeed in taking risks." After speaking, Lockhart exhaled deeply, and his expression became more relaxed. He had never told anyone about this, and after confiding in Alvin this time, he felt that the boulder in his heart had lifted up a lot. He looked at Alvin, who did not say a word, and said resignedly, "Whether you want to tell Dumbledore or the Ministry of Magic, it's up to you, but I ask me to be handsome when I am in the newspaper for the last time." Episode 98, Transformation, Lockhart, the Demon Tattoo Warrior. Inside the Lockhart office. Lockhart stopped talking after speaking, and Alvin was thinking about something. There was silence in the room. Suddenly, Alvin said, "Can I check it with magic?" "What?" Lockhart didn't hear clearly, he had just been thinking about his life after entering Azkaban. "I wanted to see why your mana is missing." Alvin repeated. Okay. Lockhart found that Alvin had not revealed his meaning for the time being, and there was a glimmer of hope in his heart. Who wouldn't want to be a good person if they could? Alvin took his wand, and the tip of the wand was pointed at Lockhart's arm, and the magic went into his body. Alvin carefully checked and found that the total amount of mana in Lockhart's body was not low, but it was very dead in this case. He naturally can't use any spells. Alvin withdrew his wand, turned a teapot on the table into a mouse, and looked at Lockhart. "Can you use the oblivion spell again?" Although Law 17 Heart didn't know what Alvin wanted to do, he didn't dare to disobey Alvin now, and obediently used the oblivion curse on the mouse. "Forget everything." A white light flashed, and the mouse became a little dumbfounded. Erwin had been observing Lockhart's magic just now, and he found that when Lockhart used the Oblivion Curse, the mana activity in his body became the same as that of a normal wizard again. "Are you good at forgetting spells when you were in school?" Erwin asked Lockhart. Lockhart replied in the affirmative. "Yes, I have a strong talent for the Oblivion Curse since I was a child. I can use it very early, and I can also control the memories I want to modify or delete." Nodding clearly, Erwin roughly understood the reason why Lockhart became like this. The magic of the Harry Potter world is idealistic, and Lockhart no longer believes in his own magic, and naturally, his magic has become dead silent. And he has always been competent in his Oblivion spell, so when he cast the Oblivion spell, not only did he not regress in level, but he became more and more skilled because it was the only spell he could master freely. It's not that magic has abandoned you, it's that you don't believe in magic anymore. Erwin spoke his conclusions. After listening to Erwin's words, Lockhart was stunned. Yes, he didn't believe in magic in the first place, so how could he blame magic for abandoning him? Looking at the gloomy Lockhart, Erwin was also thinking about what to do with him. It is true that Lockhart is a liar now, but this has nothing to do with Erwin. If Lockhart killed all those people, maybe Erwin would still want to do something for Skywalker, but he just erased the memories of those people. In the end, Erwin made up his mind that he wanted to subdue Lockhart. Although at Hogwarts, Lockhart's golden body has basically been broken. But in the outside world, he still has a great reputation. If he continues to let Lockhart develop, he can quickly become a pivotal figure in the Wizarding World City. And at that time, Erwin casually let Lockhart announce that he entered the Ministry of Magic, and he could directly obtain a very high position after all. In the Wizarding world, everyone is still relatively simple, and there are really few people like him who can package themselves. After figuring it out, Erwin took out a contract and handed it to Lockhart. "By signing this contract, I will help you regain the power of magic." After hearing this, Lockhart took the contract without hesitation, wrote his name, and then looked at Erwin expectantly. Erwin is not surprised that Lockhart will choose this. People always subconsciously grasp the last straw when drowning, and Erwin is Lockhart's last savior. Erwin didn't ink, went straight back to the bedroom, and took the suitcase. "Follow me." After that, Erwin walked into the suitcase, and Lockhart followed behind him with a curious look, looking left and right. "I can't help but be amazed at the size of the space. I didn't expect you to have such a large space box. My suitcase was bought by me for a lot of money, less than 1% of yours. I made it myself." Erwin responded casually and led Lockhart into the lab. "Lie down, I'll transform you." Lockhart obediently lay down on an operation. Erwin tinkered with a pot of metal liquid that had been used for Hermione last time, then walked over to Lockhart and told him his plan. "In fact, your magic power has not disappeared, but when you release the spell, they do not respond. I will engrave some inscriptions on your body, and they will draw the magic power in your body as a supply and issue a spell according to your wishes." When Lockhart heard this, his eyes lit up. He couldn't wait to say, "Then what are you waiting for, let's start." Erwin ignored his urging and instead reminded, "This process 453 will be painful, similar to the feeling of tattooing in the Muggle world, and it may even hurt even more. You need to be mentally prepared." "No problem." Lockhart agreed without hesitation. Seeing his appearance, Erwin didn't say anything. He took out a carving knife and started working. For the next half hour, the room was filled with Lockhart's wailing, which sounded extremely tragic. If Erwin hadn't cast a petrification spell on him, as well as a silencing spell, he would have been a little overwhelmed. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Erwin completed the final stroke and lifted the confinement of Lockhart. At this time, Lockhart's sweat mixed with blood has made the entire operating table drenched, and the ground is also a mess. Erwin summoned clean water, cleaned Lockhart, and then cleaned up the house with a cleaning charm. After a long time, Lockhart stood up with difficulty and came to Erwin's side. "Is this all right?" He couldn't believe it. Could he successfully use the spell in just half an hour? Erwin also wanted to see how the quality of his products was this time, so he simply took Lockhart to the lawn outside the villa. Episode 99, Erwin, I want you to be the Minister of Magic. On the lawn, several dummies have already been erected. This is specially made by Erwin, and it can be automatically restored after being broken, which is a good target for testing the power of spells. Lockhart, try to mobilize the magic power to the magic mark, and then you can release the spell. Standing aside, Erwin instructed Lockhart how to operate, reintroducing what effect each of his magic marks was. He inscribed nearly 20 magic patterns on Lockhart, all of which were battle-type magic, and Lockhart had to understand what kind of spell each pattern was. In case Lockhart directly used it to play the Avada spell in a normal battle, it would be cool. The operation is very simple. A total of a dozen spells is not much. Lockhart and Alvin's explanation and writing quickly figured out the method, and then experimented. Boom. 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 At this time, Lockhart was very excited, constantly bombarding the dummy excitedly with magic spells. Alvin watched this scene with satisfaction, satisfied with the power of the spell. The power of these spells is already great, close to the elite aura level. And Lockhart can completely cast spells silently and release instantly, and if his fighter is smart enough, he can already be called an elite aura level wizard. Don't think that auras are so crotch-pulling in the original, they are worthless. According to Alvin's understanding, in the whole of England, there are only about 50 auras, divided into 10 squads, an elite force belonging to the Ministry of Magic. Only on dangerous missions such as capturing powerful dark wizards will auras be sent on missions, and the elite auras refer to those squad leaders. Like Kingsley Shackle, who followed Fudge last time, he is an elite aura and is already Fudge's henchman, and Lockhart, as long as he has enough skill, is a top aura if he has magic powers. If you let those pure-blood family wizards know, they will definitely go crazy for Alvin's technology. Not every family will have a strong person in every generation, and this magic pattern technique that can guarantee the lower limit is definitely a pure-blood family's dream of the town family heritage. Finally, after violently venting all his magic, Lockhart dragged his tired body to Alvin's side. Although tired, his eyes were full of excitement. "Gaunt, my life will be yours from now on," Lockhart said to Alvin gratefully. Chuckling, Alvin shook his head. "Don't worry, I won't let you risk it casually, you have a greater role." "What do you want me to do?" Lockhart was curious. Didn't Alvin give him such a strong combat power so that he could fight with others? "I need you to continue writing books and show your strength in front of the public." Seeing that Lockhart was a little puzzled, Alvin touched his palm and continued to speak. His tone was a little careless. "What I need is your influence in the wizarding world, and when your influence is strong enough, I need you to run for Minister of Magic." Hearing this, Lockhart was first shocked by Alvin's words, and then his breathing gradually became heavy. "Oh, Minister of Magic, for Lockhart, such a person whose fame is his life. This position is obviously the most tempting. What did he risk coming to Hogwarts as a professor for, even if he was debunked? It is not for the purpose of spreading his books and his reputation to the entire wizarding world through here. Now Alvin directly gave him such a big pie, how could he not make Lockhart excited? With excited looks, Lockhart and Alvin walked out of the suitcase. Alvin did not stay and left the office directly, and Lockhart's mood still could not be calmed for a long time. He sat in his swivel chair, spinning back and forth, muttering something to himself. Suddenly, he thought of a question and stopped moving. What is Alvin's purpose in doing this? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but shiver in his heart, and he had a bold guess. Alvin wants to be the person who controls the wizarding world in England behind the scenes, and he is the puppet pushed by Alvin. Shoo! Lockhart, who thought he wanted to understand, gasped and marveled at Alvin's insidiousness with such a deep plan at such a young age. It seems that he will be a Dark Lord again in the future. However, then he shook his head with a smile, not to say that he had signed a contract with Alvin, to say that Alvin gave himself the current strength, he would not say anything. "Let me be your pawn in control of the wizarding world, Alvin Gaunt." As if whispering an oath, Lockhart pulled out a roll of parchment and a quill pen. He kept writing some plans on it. He needed to improve his influence as much as possible, and he now had strength, and many of the ideas that existed in Lockhart's mind before could be realized. Alvin, who had gone far, did not know that he had been regarded by Lockhart as the Black Hand who wanted to control the wizarding world behind the scenes. If he knew, he would definitely be confused. He just hoped that there was a person of his own above, so that what he wanted to do would not have too much trouble. How did he become the man behind the scenes? "Are you sure?" The man behind the scenes at this time was stopped by Malfoy. "I'm sure this is a promise I made as the future patriarch of Malfoy, that Christmas can be fulfilled." Malfoy answered Alvin firmly. "Okay, I promised. You will go to the 8th floor to wait for me at 8 o'clock this weekend morning." Just now, Malfoy asked Alvin to teach him magic at the cost that Alvin could visit his library. Although there was some surprise that Malfoy could have such boldness, Alvin didn't think much and directly agreed to the deal. After all, as the oldest pureblood 28, the Malfoy family still has a very attractive collection of books. "Well, I'll be there on time." Nodding excitedly, Malfoy couldn't wait to agree. "Okay, I still have things now, let's go first." After speaking, Alvin waved his hand and returned to the bedroom. Through this period of hard work, his Parseltongue has learned 77 or 88, and after practicing his pronunciation more, he will try to open the secret room again. However, before opening the secret room, Alvin has to draw a wave of cards to improve his strength. After all, if professor-level people are allowed to single out the basilisk, there is a risk of falling. Actually, the system is not showing up. I almost forgot that there is a system. He definitely wants to add as much assurance as possible before going. It just so happens that there has been no lottery for nearly half a year, and Erwin has saved more than 20,000 gold coins, and he can draw a refreshing extension at one time. Episode 101, Voldemort with his back stepped into a pseudo-legend. 5 minutes later, Dumbledore arrived where Erwin had stood before. Because he had just felt the magic fluctuations coming from this direction and did not know the exact location, Dumbledore still took a little longer to arrive. He frowned, scanning the boulders on the ground, the fallen trees, and the bottomless black hole in the mountain. "Are you the same, Tom?" Mumbling to himself, Dumbledore waved his wand in an attempt to recreate the scene just now, just like he had done last year in the Battle of the Forbidden Forest of Erwin. But alas, because the magic fluctuations were too chaotic, he found nothing. In Dumbledore's cognition, there were only 3 people who could use such powerful spells. One was him, Grindelwald, and finally Voldemort. And Grindelwald can't get out of Newgamond prison, then it can only be Voldemort. At this time, Dumbledore's heart was very solemn. If it was Voldemort, then he would have to reassess Voldemort's combat power, and in the past, Voldemort only had a deep study of the 3 unforgivable spells, and even Dumbledore had to admit that Voldemort's use of those 3 spells was the first in the world. But now, Voldemort is now so deep in these normal attack spells, which can't help but make Dumbledore jealous. And Erwin, the culprit of this matter, had long been away from the scene and quietly returned to his bedroom with fury, unaware that he had let Voldemort carry a cauldron for him. "Erwin! Wake up," Professor McGonagall asked everyone to assemble in the Great Hall. Before I could sort out today's harvest, there was a rapid knock outside the door. "Okay, I'll go right away." Although there were some doubts, Erwin immediately agreed. Soon, Erwin arrived at the auditorium, where almost all the young wizards had arrived and sat at the long table in his own academy. "Cho, do you know what's going on?" Walking to Cho's side, Erwin asked Cho after sitting down. "I don't know." Professor McGonagall didn't say anything, but her expression was serious. Cho shook her head, indicating that she was also confused. Many of the little wizards in the Great Hall were constantly playing Hitcher, and it was already midnight, and many of them had been called out of bed from their sleep. Erwin looked up, and sure enough, he saw Professor McGonagall frowning and a strained face. Obviously something had happened. Could it be that the basilisk came out to attack people? Just as Erwin was thinking so, Dumbledore and his phoenix appeared in the professorship. Looking at so many people in front of him, he was stunned at first, but soon understood why. "Albus." Professor McGonagall was also relieved to see Dumbledore's appearance, and Dumbledore's serious tone when the Patronus spoke just now startled McGonagall. She hadn't seen Dumbledore order her so solemnly in years. Dumbledore nodded at McGonagall, signaling her to speak later, and then said to all the young wizards, "Don't panic, everyone. Today is just a test for you to encounter an emergency. Okay, everyone disband." After everyone listened, they didn't have any doubts, just complained a few words about why they did the test so late, and went to their respective lounges. But Erwin always felt that something was wrong. The look on Professor McGonagall's face just now can't be fake. Something must have happened. However, Erwin did not think about it. His current mind is all on how much his strength has improved. After all the students left, Dumbledore also returned to his office, and he called Snape and Professor McGonagall over. "Albus, what happened to you just now?" As soon as McGonagall entered the office, she asked Dumbledore, and Snape next to her also had an inquiring look on her face. Dumbledore did not answer immediately. "Minerva, Severus, would you like a late-night snack?" After he finished speaking, he waved his wand and conjured up some pastries. "Albus. Now is not the time to say that." Professor McGonagall was a little dissatisfied, and Dumbledore still cares about him left and right, which makes McGonagall a little dissatisfied. "Okay, then let's get down to business first." Dumbledore changed the topic from being kind as a stream. "I just felt a powerful magic fluctuation not far from Hogwarts, so I went to check it out." "So what did you find?" Snape was the first to ask. It must not be a simple character to be called powerful by Dumbledore. Dumbledore shook his head with regret. "I'm sorry, Severus, I arrived late. There was only some rubble and broken trees, and the people were already gone." Seeing that Snape and McGonagall both had pensive expressions, Dumbledore added quickly, "According to my inference, the entire Europa, the wizard who can cause such a big movement, is only 3 people." "What do you mean?" Snape quickly understood the hidden meaning of Dumbledore's words and asked. "Yes, I suspect Tom is back." After listening to Dumbledore's conclusion, McGonagall and Snape's faces changed in unison. If it was really the return of Voldemort, then the wizarding world would be chaotic again. "Ask for flowers." For a time, the whole room fell into silence. Dumbledore's eyes also kept sparkling, as if planning something. Phew. With a long sigh of relief, Erwin stopped waving his wand. Just now, because he couldn't master the power of the spell, he almost blew up the small villa in the suitcase. Alvin is also no way, the bonus provided by the wand is too terrifying. With just one shot, he blew his specially made test dummy to pieces. What kind of disarming curse is this, respectively? It is a life spell that makes the enemy never touch the wand. Alvin practiced for 2 hours, but still could not perfectly control the power of the spell. However, it is already late today, and he can only train slowly in the future to reach the realm of freedom as soon as possible. System, look at my current properties panel. Alvin lay comfortably on the bed, ready to check his current attributes. Host, Alvin Gaunt. Age, 13 years old. Identity, Hogwarts second-year freshman. Bloodline, Witch. Magic scale, 1054. Magic items, Distant ideal town, Wand leaving charms. Talent, 8, Youth. History. Left name. Defense against the dark arts, 7, Heavenly Wizards, Transfiguration. Talent, 7, Heavenly Wizards, Potions. Talent, 7, Heavenly Wizards, Dark Magic. Talent, 9, Demon King. Descended. Spells, Fierce Fire Curse, Heart Drill. Carpal Bone, Avada spell, only the 3 most skilled are listed. Gold coins. Sure enough, Alvin found that his magic level had surpassed the professor level and reached the point of pseudo-legend, although it was still some distance from Dumbledore, but he was also a strong man of the same level. At the same time, his talent panel has also become extremely gorgeous, especially charms, which is only 1 level away from reaching the full level, but Alvin still did not use the talent breaking card. After all, the gold card is still relatively easy for him to obtain, and the chance of breaking the talent limit card is much smaller, but the 3 most skilled magics are actually black magic, and Alvin is a little awkward to watch. With the mentality of not seeing and not being upset, Alvin directly closed the system panel and fell asleep. Episode 102, Entering the Chamber of Secrets. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, more than a week had passed. During this week, Alvin focused his main energy on controlling the skyrocketing strength. After repeated training and running in, Alvin can now control the power of the spell more freely, and there will be no more scenes where a disarming spell will blow people to pieces. In addition, his Parseltongue has almost learned the language, at least the Python he conjured himself can already understand his pronunciation. Alvin plans to go into the secret room tonight to check. He has been dragging on for a long time, and if he does not act, it is very likely that other people will start to be attacked. Alvin remembers that in the movie, the entire Hogwarts student was not allowed to go home this Christmas. This is not good. Alvin also has to help Arya unite the overturned alley during Christmas, which is related to his future plans. Could it be that because of the closure of the school, those 2 families will live a little longer? If so, the people of the 2 families must give Dumbledore 2 knocks. Shaking his head and putting aside the strange thoughts in his head for a while, Alvin focused on the chat between Cho and Marie next to him. Just last night, Lockhart hosted another dueling club, but Alvin did not attend, and it was at last night's event that Lockhart was out of the limelight. He still chose Snape as his demonstration opponent this time, but surprisingly, Lockhart showed strong combat power this time and fought very fiercely with Snape. He even gained some of the upper hand because of Snape's initial contempt for underestimating the enemy, but when Snape reacted, he was allowed to move back into some situations. But Lockhart's cleverness is evident when he wisely stops the dueling presentation when Snape is about to take off. This also gave the young wizards an illusion that Lockhart raised Snape to a hand in order to save face for Snape from the initial suppression to the later draw. And Snape was so angry that he couldn't understand how this waste had suddenly become so powerful. Could it be that he had been hiding? And the little wizards don't think so much, they only know that Lockhart shows great strength, which perfectly matches the image in his book. Especially those female fans of Lockhart, they are very excited one by one. Some time ago, due to Lockhart's poor performance in class, his fans were also a little unable to raise their heads, but now, they can finally say proudly, "Our brother is no longer pretending, the showdown is over, he is a powerful wizard." Unfortunately, Lockhart said that at the end of the semester, he will resign as a professor of dark arts to help more wizards fight danger. The young wizards, although regretful, also worshipped Lockhart more, and even Harry and their impression of Lockhart has changed. But they still have some doubts. Didn't Alvin say before, Lockhart is a liar? After listening to last night's events, Alvin smiled. Lockhart still has 2 brushes, and through a showmanship duel, he reverses his image at school, and can also spread his reputation to all wizarding families through these little wizards. I believe that after he leaves Hogwarts, there will definitely be many pure-blood families who will find him and have a relationship with him. After all, there are really very few wizards who can completely retreat from this position. Alvin plans to bring Lockhart with him at Christmas to meet the Arya family, let them get to know each other, and they can also have a cooperation, and he will leave the rest alone. Late at night, Alvin cast a phantom spell and quietly came to the girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor. How does it sound? A little weird? But fortunately, this is not the first time Alvin has entered the girls' bathroom, and he is now familiar with the road. Today he was lucky, the ghost who had been wandering here. Myrtle is not here now. He needs to enter the secret room before Myrtle returns. In the girls' bathroom, all the sinks formed a circle, and Alvin came to a faucet, and there was a small snake hidden on it. Alvin used Parseltongue accents against the pattern. Hiss, open. Click. Click. The little snake on the faucet suddenly swam and burrowed into the water outlet of the water dragon. All the sinks trembled, and the large lid above was separated from the sink. The sink below began to spin, part of it sinking into the ground, and the rest scattered, revealing a huge pipe in the center. Alvin looked out. The whole pipe appeared very smooth, and it was dark below, and the scene could not be seen clearly. Cast a floating spell on yourself and slowly float downward. Next, there was a long underground pipe, very winding, and Alvin was not sure how far he had floated. He did not expect that there would be such a large space under Hogwarts. Finally, 10 minutes later, Alvin finally floated out of the pipe and landed on the ground. It was a circular clearing, filled with stagnant water and countless skeletons, but according to Alvin's observations, all of them belonged to rats, toads, and other small animals. After thinking about it, Alvin cast another floating spell on himself, crossed the path covered with white bones, flew out of the only circular arch in front of him, and a behemoth appeared in front of his eyes. A snake molt, which looks like it is 20 or 30 or 20 feet long, is very shriveled, and it should be a lot of years. Alvin didn't put it away. This snake molt no longer had any research value, and the magic fluctuations on it had disappeared. Moving on, after walking through one arch after another, turning an unknown number of detours, Alvin finally came to the end. This is a 10-meter-high gold gate with 2 crossed snakes carved on the door, as well as many ancient magic texts. Alvin looked at this door, touched it, and after confirming that it was really gold, saliva flowed down. Such a large door, if it was all made of gold, how much would it be worth? Resisting the mood of smashing the gate with a magic spell, Alvin checked the magic text on the gate. Episode 103, The Humble Basilisk. The ancient magic texts on the door are all solidified, and there is also the effect of enhancing defense. Alvin believes that Slytherin is still very attentive to this secret room, otherwise he would not have invested so much manpower and resources. Alvin still used Parseltongue and opened the door. The 2 snake shadows on the door seemed to come to life, and while they swam to both sides, the gate slowly separated from the left and right. Alvin entered the space, a huge space surrounded by many stone pillars. Each stone pillar is carved with giant snakes of different forms, but all lifelike, as if they are guarding this secret room. Slytherins are such snake enthusiasts. Alvin couldn't help but sigh, and then his eyes fell on the most obvious center. It was a wide platform, a tall statue, erected there. It was a statue of Salazar Slytherin. If the statue looked the same as the Slytherin himself, then he would be 17 to be called oddly looking in that he had a monkey-like face, and a thin beard almost dragged to the hem of his robe. Stepping forward, Alvin carefully observed the statue and found a line of small words on it. Like the Forerunner, Salazar Slytherin respectfully pronounced this sentence: "Talk to me, Slytherin, the best of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, then close your eyes." After thinking about it, Alvin took a few steps back and read out this passage in a Parseltongue voice. "Talk to me, Slytherin, the best of the 4 founders of Hogwarts." When the words fell, Salazar's beard suddenly dropped, forming a huge door. Alvin heard a faint rustling sound from the inside of this door, and he was getting closer and closer, as if some animal was approaching outside from the depths. Alvin knew it was a basilisk, but he didn't close his eyes, he just turned on Avalon. The basilisk's straight eyes are terrifying, but they turn petrified just after reflection, and Alvin doesn't believe that the basilisk can stare him alive under Avalon's protection. Hiss air, I'm so hungry. Before he could see the figure, the basilisk's neighing reached Alvin's ears. The next moment, the huge giant snake drilled out from there, and the huge body fell on the stone slab on the ground and appeared. Bang bang. It quickly approached Alvin, and Alvin did not dodge, but a staff had already appeared in his palm until the basilisk crawled to Alvin's side. His body was not completely detached from the door. Hiss, I need food, air. Shut up. Don't argue, let me take a closer look at you. Basilisk? The heir's temper was a little grumpy, but the will instilled in him by Slytherin was to obey all the instructions of the heir, and he could only shut up aggrievedly. Looking at this strange appearance, Alvin nodded with satisfaction, and then carefully observed the full picture of the basilisk. He looked carefully at the appearance of the basilisk, all green, with dragon scale-like scales, densely covering the whole body, providing it with strong defense, and the flat head had hideous bulges. The most frightening thing is the sharp fangs of the basilisk, which drips venom from time to time and falls on the floor, producing a nourishing corrosive sound. If it were not for the automatic repair of these stone slabs, I am afraid that this place would have been tattered long ago. This has the meaning of the ancient mythical dragon. At this time the basilisk already has scales, the horns on the head also have some rudimentary shapes, and they are almost limbs. Alvin was eager to see if he could turn into a dragon in the end. Who let you out before? Alvin withdrew his gaze and asked the basilisk. Can you describe what he looks like as a man and a woman? Alvin was speechless. This basilisk was either an inheritor or hungry. But you can't blame it. It is estimated that in the eyes of the basilisk, all humans are the same. Shaking his head, Alvin asked other questions. Do you know what legacy Salazar Slytherin left behind in the Chamber of Secrets? This time the basilisk finally did not repeat, but gave Alvin a clue. The trial get. Alvin probably understood what the basilisk meant, and the Slytherins left some tests in the Chamber of Secrets, and those who passed could get some rewards. So has anyone obtained the treasure inside? Alvin continued to ask. Never. Alvin nodded. It seemed that Voldemort had not succeeded. Will you come with me? Come with me and have food. I see that you are hungry and thin. Alvin looked at the basilisk's body that was thicker than the surrounding stone pillars, and said against his will. He now found that this basilisk was quite humble, and it was not as ferocious as the records, and whatever Alvin said, this basilisk would obey orders. So his collecting fetish also came up, ready to subdue this basilisk and keep it in the small lake of suitcases. It just so happened that the space in the suitcase was expanded several times by Alvin, who was holding a good staff, and it was more than 917 to raise this basilisk. When the basilisk heard Alvin say this, he also hesitated. The basilisk has hardly eaten enough in these hundreds of years, and recently, there have been fewer and fewer rats, but remembering the Slytherin mission, it was ready to refuse. Alvin also understood why the basilisk did not agree, and said in pursuit, I didn't let you leave the school either. Slytherin asked you to guard the secret room. You can follow my hand, I will also be in the school. When you go out foraging, don't you leave the secret room too? Listening to Alvin's analysis, the basilisk's not very intelligent head suddenly realized. Yes, I followed the successor, and I also had to live in school, which is not at all a violation of Slachelin's orders. Thinking of this, the basilisk still said to Alvin to confirm. Hiss, go with you, eat, a lot. Alvin nodded without hesitation. How much this basilisk can eat, it is not a problem at all to raise hundreds of cattle and sheep in the trunk now. These are enough for the daily consumption of the basilisk. And the basilisk heard Alvin's affirmation, happily got into the suitcase and entered the artificial lake to rest. Alvin looked through the room, trying to find clues to the Slytherin trials. Episode 104, Blood is Glory. I'm waiting for an extraordinary life. Looking at the empty secret room, Alvin scratched his head with some distress. In such a big place, the basilisk only said that there were clues here, and there was no other information at all. In desperation, Alvin could only carp it up a little to look for clues. Half an hour later. Bye. Is it a basilisk shaking Lao Tzu? Standing in front of the statue, Alvin said angrily. He searched for a long time and found nothing unusual anywhere. And under the perception of mana, there is no special magic fluctuation in the entire secret room. Just as Alvin was about to give up, he inadvertently looked up at the statue. Huh? Alvin suddenly noticed that the Slytherin statue had no eyeballs in its eye sockets. Logically speaking, Slytherin carved his own statue so vividly, should not make such a low-level mistake. After thinking for a while, Alvin manipulated his wand to fill the statue with a pair of eyeballs and pupils. Just as Alvin finished the last bit of carving, two eyes suddenly blinked. A floor suddenly collapsed, forming several steps. Looking at the stairs in front of him, Alvin blinked his eyes in disbelief. Just now, he tried to test the floor with his wand, but he didn't find that this was a mechanism, but he was very happy to find it. The wand glowed faintly, and Alvin walked down the steps. Another long tunnel. Through this tunnel, Alvin's eyes suddenly brightened. This is a room the size of an auditorium, and the moment Alvin comes in, countless magic lights automatically turn on, dotting the ceiling, forming a starry sky. There were plenty of bookcases throughout the room, and the books on them were probably Slytherin back then. Although thousands of years have passed, it is still very well preserved. Finally, my successor has arrived in this Chamber of Secrets, and I didn't expect another Slytherin offspring. An old voice came to mind, and Alvin looked at it, and behind a bookcase, an old man walked out. Slytherin? Alvin spoke in surprise. The image of this old man and the statue outside cannot be said to be very similar, only identical. Could it be that Slytherin also mastered the secret of eternal life and has lived until now? The old man nodded and shook his head again before saying, I'm not a real Slytherin, I'm just a puppet he made, and there is a wisp of spiritual intent attached. Alvin nodded, but did not step forward. He was still a little wary of the old man. The Slytherin didn't care when he looked like this, walked over to a long table, and sat down. What age is it now? Alvin thought for a moment. It's about 1,000 years after the school was founded. When the old man heard this time, he also had a trace of emotion. It's been more than 1,000 years, time flies so fast, the last time I woke up, it should have been more than 50 years since now. That little guy is also a descendant of Slytherin, but unfortunately he didn't find it here, he just went out a few times late with the basilisk and never appeared again. Alvin knew that the Slytherin was talking about Tom Riddle. If you have any questions, just ask. This place, you can only enter 3 times, after 3 times, this place will be closed to you forever. The Slytherins knew that Alvin had a lot of questions to ask, and they were unambiguous and pointed it out. After sorting out the language, Alvin spoke. Does your body usually not wake up? Nope. Did you leave this chamber of secrets to rid you of Muggle-born wizards? Who said that? The Slytherin suddenly became excited. Who left such a ridiculous rumor? Looking at the somewhat excited Slytherin, Alvin was a little strange. Hasn't your Slytherin house always been this philosophy? Pedigree is preferred. Yes. The Slytherin said of course, and then he added. But I never rejected Muggle wizards, I was just worried that these Muggle-born wizards would leak Hogwarts secrets to the church at the time, that's why I like pure-blood wizards. Blood is glory. I'm waiting for an extraordinary life. As long as I become a wizard and enter Hogwarts, they are my compatriots, how can I directly clean them out because of their origins? I left this secret room, first, to wait for one of my inheritors to appear, and second, to leave a guard force for the school. The Slytherin finished this paragraph very excitedly, and it could be seen that he was very proud of his identity as a wizard. As long as it is a wizard, it is the same kind in his eyes, and there is no pure-blood hybrid. After listening to it, Alvin also understood Slytherin's thoughts. In his day, the antagonism between wizards and muggles was much more serious than it is now, when anyone found to be a wizard would be immediately locked up and burned at the stake. Slytherin's concerns are understandable. Then why did you break up with the other 3 founders and leave Hogwarts? Alvin asked curiously, he was also very interested in the gossip of this 1,000 years ago. Not that Godric guy yet. He felt that the magic I taught was too dangerous and should be taught to the young wizard some magic that didn't have such a side effect. In a fit of anger, I left Hogwarts and went to do my own research. Slytherin was a little annoyed, but when he mentioned the name of the Gryffindor founder, he also had some nostalgia. Sure enough, the older the history book, the more distorted, silently complaining in his heart, Alvin told some of the current situation. Slytherin was also relieved to hear that there were so many students at Hogwarts now, but when he heard about Voldemort's ideas and actions, he was very disdainful. It turns out that the little guy 50 years ago caused such a big storm, but it is really short-sighted to use such a lowly means as a Horcrux to pursue immortality. In his words, he meant to look down on Voldemort. He claimed that there were at least 5 ways to live forever in their time that were far more effective than the evil means of the Horcruxes. After all, the more Horcruxes split, the weaker their souls will become, and they will lose a lot of reason. Alvin also understood that Voldemort's performance after his resurrection can be described as intellectual, and his feelings are caused by his split soul too much. After all, there are very few introductions about Horcruxes in the Forbidden Book section of the school, which only shows that this is a very evil magic, and there is no detailed explanation. Therefore, Alvin does not know much about this. Well, gossip is here, come and accept my test, as long as you pass the test, these books and my experimental materials will be yours. The Slytherin also ended the topic, ready to see if the successor met his requirements. Episode 105, Slytherin, is the little wizard so outrageous now? After the Slytherin finished speaking, with a wave of his hand, all the bookshelves moved on their own, leaned against the wall, and many pillars rose underground, enclosing the space where Alvin and they were standing in a ring. Let Alvin have the feeling that he is going to duel with Slytherin. Looking at Alvin, who raised his wand, ready to put himself down, the corner of Slytherin's mouth twitched slightly. How could this little wizard be so grumpy, not at all like his own heir, but more like Godric's reckless heir? Little devil, put the wand down, you won't need a wand for the first level test. After speaking, the Slytherin couldn't help but ask, which house are you from? Alvin smiled coyly, put his wand into his robe, and introduced himself. Alvin Gant, Ravenclaw 2nd year. The Slytherin nodded, he didn't care if Alvin was a Slytherin student, as long as he wasn't a Gryffindor, everything was easy to say. With no wand, the Slytherin could only wave his hands and summon a set of tables and chairs, as well as a roll of parchment. Following 633 to inherit my legacy, you must have a profound attainment in magic literature, and this first level is to test how your magic literature reserves are. Alvin didn't expect that this Slytherin actually had a written test as a test. Walking to the table, Alvin looked at the contents of the parchment. Well, it's pretty simple. Then he began to answer the questions, and after only 15 minutes, the Slytherin got the paper that Alvin had completed. So soon? Glancing at Alvin, the Slytherin looked at the test paper. After a while, he nodded with satisfaction. This little wizard is good, all the questions are answered, and they are very standard. It's time for the second level of testing. Most of my inheritance is related to magic experiments, so you must have a strong ability to operate. In this second level, you can choose to refine potions or refine an alchemy item, and then I will comment. After listening to the Slytherin explanation, Alvin nodded after listening. This is very rivery. Do you have materials? Alvin asked like a Slytherin. Now it was Slytherin's turn to be a little embarrassed. This would have been almost 1,000 years since the Slytherins left as a potion for testing, even after a special preservation, would certainly not be usable. After all, time is the most powerful weapon. Alvin saw the Slytherin's embarrassment and lifted the box in his hand. Here are some of my works, would you like to take a look? The Slytherin let out a sigh and said, okay, just take it out and I'll take a look. Alvin opened the box, but switched to normal mode and did not enter the small world. He took out a bag and threw it to the Slytherin. Here are some magic props I refined, you can take a look. The Slytherin took the bag and took out some props from it, including pendants, bracelets, and earrings. With his eyesight, he can naturally see the sophistication of these props, although some magic he does not know. After all, many magic was invented later. But with these precise carvings and complicated and neat magic pattern formations, is it really what a second-grade little wizard can do? Slytherin looked at Alvin with some suspicion. Did you really do it yourself? Shrugging his shoulders, Alvin did not refute, but stepped forward, picked up a bracelet, and explained to the Slytherin the process of his own refining, as well as the idea of choosing the magic pattern. After listening to Alvin's explanation, Slytherin also had to admit that this little wizard's attainment in alchemy was much higher than that of his age. It's just that he doesn't know that these are just ordinary products that Alvin refined a long time ago. He rarely refines magic items now, because he has more important research going on. Seeing that Slytherin and Alvin discussed some magic pattern formations that he had not seen for a while, they suddenly realized that the assessment was not over yet. He quickly stopped talking and then got to the point. Okay, let's take one last test. For wizards, in the end, they still have to rely on their own wands to speak, so the final assessment is the battle. The Slytherin clapped his hands, and one of the guards in armor at the door strode to the ring and then stood behind the Slytherin. This armored samurai is your opponent. This was carefully made by me at that time, you just cast the spell as much as you want. Are you sure, enjoy? Alvin looked at the Slytherin with a strange look and confirmed to him. The Slytherin smiled slightly. This little guy still didn't believe in his craftsmanship, so he said comfortingly, don't worry, this armor is very strong. Looking at Alvin's still somewhat hesitant look, he added again. Don't worry, it's okay if it breaks. Hearing the Slytherin say this, Alvin was finally relieved, nodded, and took out his wand. The Slytherin stepped aside and pitted the armor against Alvin, then clapped his hands again, and the armor moved, the runes above the great sword flickered, and a red light emanated from the tip of the sword. Alvin did not use the armor spell to harden, but slightly sideways, and dodged the spell. Faint. Alvin's coma spell was not slow at all, and a coma spell the thickness of a water cup hit the armor directly. Boom. The entire armor fell apart in an instant, and countless scattered armor parts shattered into slag and smashed to the floor. The Slytherins on the side looked stunned. Do you call this a coma curse? What kind of spell is this water cup thick? Is the little wizard already so outrageous now? However, he quickly reacted, and his armor samurai was already shattered. My armor. With a scream, the Slytherin hurriedly threw himself down next to the armor, and his movements were so sensitive that even Alvin almost didn't see it. At this time, Slytherin also wanted to cry without tears. This armored warrior was the proud work of the Buddha figure back then. This is not just an alchemical artifact, he is more like a work of art. At this time, Alvin was also a little embarrassed. He only used 50% of his strength for insurance, but he didn't expect this armor to be so careless. It's the old man, you said you went all out. Alvin's muttering was heard by the Slytherin, which made his eyes darken, and he almost fainted.